Awesome stuff. Love celebrating families like that, getting a chance to do that at church. If I missed you guys, if you came in a little later, my name's Aaron, one of the pastors here at Grace. Excited to walk with you this morning as we wind down over the next couple weeks our wisdom series called The Art of Navigating. Super fun series. If you've been with us in this series about wisdom and walking in life, hopefully it's been very helpful to you as much as it has been to me. If you haven't been with us, if you're at a place in your life where you maybe feel stuck, you're trying to get through something, kind of break through a place where you feel down, or you're looking to kind of do better areas in your life, I would recommend going back on our YouTube channel and checking out this series. It could be really helpful to you as well. I love this. This has helped me immensely in my life. Can really never get enough of trying to do better sometimes. I have a variety of weaknesses. One of my favorite people says that. It's Ryan Rodman that says that a lot. I'm really good at doing bad at things, and maybe you feel that way as well. So I know that I always need a little more help, which is super fun, and it's not that fun. But one of the things that I've realized over time in my life, when I'm trying to do better at things, when I'm trying to kind of break through a difficult time, even when I'm trying to put wisdom into place in my life, if you've ever been doing that, if you've been doing that during this series, you probably realize, as much as I have, that at times, one of the hardest parts is to keep after it. To keep doing it, to have the energy to really see it all the way through. And if you're like me, oftentimes when we talk about this journey, right, the art of navigating, we're on this journey to get wisdom. Journeys can be difficult. I don't know about you if journeys have ever gone badly for you, but if there's one thing we know about journeys, it's that unexpected things happen. If you've ever been on a road trip, and a car did something you didn't expect, and you're like, why are we doing this? If you have ever been on a journey of any kind, you've seen a movie and it takes unexpected turns, kind of like the whole plot thing. Life can be like that, right? It can take unexpected turns, and what happens is when we're trying to change things, we can meet resistance at times, right? Sometimes it's from people, right? As you exercise wisdom in your life, you're trying to make real changes, especially if they're connected to the person of Jesus. At times you can meet resistance, some from people, right? I know I've lost friends when I've made changes in my life before. I know relationships have sometimes become more tense because I'm making changes in my life, right? Oftentimes we can meet even spiritual opposition, right? As we're trying to do this, right, we start to have insecurities creep in, things that aren't true about us anymore if we know Christ. Like maybe the fact that it creeps in that, hey, you can't do this. Hey, you'll never change that about yourself. That is who you are, right? Because that's what someone told you, right? All of these things are created. We can meet spiritual resistance in that way. And on top of it all, we have to live our regular life while we're pursuing wisdom. So we have a job, we have maybe a family, and we're just tired. You ever feel tired, right? Sometimes you're just tired. And on top of that, when you're trying to do this in the folds of all that, the emotional energy that it takes to really make change can just kind of knock the wind out of you at times. And so I think you're probably with me when we think that these things can go wrong. And I want to give us the best shot at this. I want to give us the best shot at keeping after it, because that's what I realized. I'm like, what is it that I can do? What can Jesus show me that we can do where we can actually have the best shot as we're trying to put wisdom into play in our life, that we can actually stay after it. We can actually have the energy to see it through. And I think one of the keys to this is actually seeing our journey in a different way. Right, as you're on the journey and unexpected things happen, right? When you're on the journey and you start to get beat up. I'll tell you a story. One time I went on a road trip with my family. It was a 14-hour road trip. It was really, really awesome. We have small children. It was a couple years ago when I just had two of them. And my oldest, he threw up 3 times before we got an hour from our house. We weren't even an hour away. And I remember being at the gas station, and I'm like cleaning out the car seat again. We're on the last change of clothes. There's a lot of hours left to go, and I'm standing there, I'm like, did anyone ask the question, is it worth it? Like, is this worth it? Have we asked that? Because we're not even an hour away from home, and we have no clothes left for this one child of ours. So, like, what do we do, right? And I remember it just kind of, I felt a little bit, I'm like, how are we going to do this? And we did it because you're a family, and that's what you do, okay? You just push through. But that was unexpected. And I almost didn't know what to do. But the point is, at that point, you have to make a decision. Like, I have to build some resilience. I have to get through this. I have to move on if this is what I want to do. And here's what I think as we look at these things that happen in our lives, as we get the wind knocked out of us, as we start to pursue wisdom and we start to feel, I don't know if I'm going to make it. This is getting difficult. Or something completely unrelated to that sucks the energy out of what we're trying to do. is we have to start to look at things differently. And I think this is what we have to do, is we have to look at our difficulty that we're facing through the lens of thankfulness. And if you're reading this and you're like, that's confusing, doesn't really seem awesome way to do that, I'm with you. Because here's what the Bible would say, and I actually thought the same thing when I read this passage for the first time. I remember being shown this passage, and it sounded a little bit like what I just read to you. You're like, how is that helpful? That sounds like something my mom would tell me to do, and I don't really like that. It never really helped me. But we're going to dig into it. But here's what the Bible would say. And we're going to continue to look at this passage today, but in Philippians 4, if you want to turn there, you can if you have it on your Bible. If you have a Bible app on your phone. If you don't have a Bible, there's some under the seats in front of you. We'd love for you to have that. If you don't own one, you can take that home. But here's what it says in Philippians 4, verses 4 through 9. It says this: rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. So there's this passage here, and I remember being in a difficult time and someone showing me this passage, and I'm like, cool, so you would like for me to be thankful for the most difficult thing in my life. Am I hearing you correctly? It's like, okay, I'm going to find, this is not it, right? I'm going to find something else. But here's what I immediately thought. I'm like, that's impossible. I don't know how that could happen. You might be looking at me and saying, Aaron, you must be crazy if you think I'm going to be thankful for what I'm going through right now. I'll be honest with you, this part of the Bible has been challenging for me. It's like a nut I've been trying to crack for a long time, trying to figure out how to do this in this wisdom series, even thinking about how to stay on course. I think that I learned something here. But what we're operating out of is this, is when we get to this spot, the reason this doesn't make sense, the reason that when someone says, be thankful in your hard times, the reason it doesn't work is because it's just so obvious that in the most painful moments of our life, in the midst of our difficulty, thankfulness is just not a thing that it comes naturally at all. It just doesn't. And so I was wrestling with this, and I imagine you have as well. Like any situation, though, when we're on a journey for something, if we're taking a journey for wisdom, we have to learn during it because it's not something we expect, right? Journeys never go, like I shared with you, as expected, right? Whatever journey you're on right now, something unexpected has probably happened to you, and it's not convenient. It's maybe not what you want. It's unexpected. And because many times it's difficult, we're wrestling with it. You're trying to exercise wisdom, and you're like, I'm trying to get this wisdom because no one ever gave it to me. They should have shown me how to do this. I don't know how to do it, right? You might be on this journey for different realizations, but the bottom line is for all of us, when we start to ask for wisdom and exercise it, it's because getting wisdom is realizing and admitting that we have a deficit in our life. We need help. Wisdom is seeking to do better with things that we don't have. We need to receive that from people. And so when we're on this journey, staying on the course can be challenging. And these setbacks come and can make it really difficult. And here's one of the first things that I think will help us, right? I think it's adjusting expectations, right? When we walk through a wisdom journey, or we walk through a journey, or we're going through difficult times, I think that we have to adjust our expectations. Here's generally how this works for me, just being vulnerable for a second. When I do anything, I pretty much just expect it to go well. It will go fine. It will be perfect, right? I'm an optimist, all right? It's a strength, okay? But here's what happens. Have you ever tried that attitude with like a car and then your car breaks down, right? If your expectation is that nothing ever goes wrong with your car and it breaks, you're like, what the heck? What's going on, right? I'm like, what did I do to deserve this? What's wrong? My expectations aren't right. If I have proper expectations, I know that I live in Ohio. There are potholes the size of cars, right? The salt literally dissolves your car away. You will have no car at some point, right? If my expectations come from there, I have a little better view when something happens. I'm like, yeah, maintenance. Yeah, you got to do. Sometimes that happens, right? You get a flat tire now and then because, I don't know, somebody's throwing nails all over the road or whatever is in your tires. But here's the thing is when we look at our life and we're exercising wisdom, we're on a journey, we have to accept that hard times will come. Sorry if that just is like blowing your thing. If you are expecting your life to go perfect all the time, good luck to you, right? I tried that for a little bit, would not recommend, right? It is not good. We have to manage our expectations, and if we can start by saying, okay, when I go to change something, when I go to exercise wisdom, or even when I'm just walking through life, hard times will come, right? These things are going to happen. So we're going to prepare ourselves that way. So when we go on a journey, expecting that it won't be perfect, going in with 50% grace for yourself, right? Going in knowing that you're going to face challenges, you are automatically going to be one step ahead of figuring that out. Because here's the reality. Over the last couple weeks, we've talked about these things where we reach forks in the road and we're trying to figure out where to go. Right, we have these loops that are generational, things that we just keep falling back into, right? And at times when we just drift away from what the Lord has for us. What we're saying is we know those things are going to happen. And so if we can say that when we get there, we won't be so caught off guard. Because what we don't want to do is be driven by the emotion of those things happening. Because what happens when my expectations aren't right about the car and something breaks is I'm totally controlled by like out of controlness. Right? I'm like, this isn't right. Like the emotions of it, it's hard. But if I can manage it when it happens, I'm like somewhat prepared for it. We don't want to be driven by the emotions of what happens in our life. We want to be driven by wisdom. If we're asking God for wisdom and going on that journey, we want to be driven by that. I've actually had to practice this a lot recently, a lot over time. But I was in, some of you know this, I've talked to you some about it. I was in a car accident back in July. And my truck got totaled. I was bad enough I had to take an ambulance ride, all this stuff, right? So I was doing that. It's the first time I've ever been in a car accident. And it helped me come to some realizations about wisdom in my life and staying the course. In general, I want to exercise wisdom in my life. I would say I'm on this journey with you. I want to do this all the time. But what happens when something like this happens, it really challenges that. And here's how this went for me. Right away, right? Obviously, ambulance, hospital, I'm like there's like no one there. I'm like the least important person because I'm not dying. And so I'm like in a room and I'm like, is anyone going to help me? Like, I don't know what's going on. Like I was there till like midnight. It's happened at like 4 p.m. So automatically I'm like out a whole day. I did let my wife know that I was okay, right? I did call her and tell her that. So I was saying, but my mind's already racing, right? I'm sitting in a room. My shoulder was in a lot of pain because the seatbelt like jacked up. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, I'm hurt. What are all these bills going to be? Like, have you ever seen a hospital bill? Like, that's not really cool. I was like, am I going to have a car payment again? Because here was my plan. My plan was to drive my 2009 Toyota for all of time, because that's what you do when you have Toyotas. You drive them forever. No plans to get rid of it. No plans for it to break, right? I was like, that's what I'm doing. That's what you do. And I'm sitting in this hospital bed, and all of these little things keep coming up into my mind, and I'm thinking, this wasn't the plan. We have deviated from the plan. Like the alarms are going off, like all of these things coming up. And I'm starting to think, I'm just like, why is this happening? What is going on? What am I going to do? How am I going to solve this, right? This is night one, right? And so all of this is happening. And here's what happened over the next couple of days. This was kind of my mindset. And I did not like where it was taking me. It did not work, because here's what happened. I'm sitting there like, what is going on? I can't believe that guy. How did that guy not strap his shop vac down in the middle of the road and say that's not going anywhere? That's why it fell off, right? Why was the other person on their phone? Why? What happened was this. I got no answers. I was frustrated. Right? I was frustrated with everyone. I wanted to get back to the plan. I'm like, if we could just rewind time, that would be the best solution here, right? Not living in reality. Like, what if it didn't happen? Have we tried that, right? I'm like, that's where I want to go. Right? I even got like, all like prideful and woes me on myself. I'm like, Lord, why do bad things happen to good people? It's like I'm like really digging deep, right? Then my mind starts to go this direction. Why do you give your toughest battles to your strongest soldiers, right? All this thing. I'm like, why? And so I'm getting here. I don't like this, because what's happening, bottom line is, it didn't get me anywhere except for I'm blaming people, right? I'm just finding someone to blame. I have bitterness. And I would say overall, it's just moving me away from the person of Christ. And I didn't like that. I'm like, okay, this cannot be the way that we do this, or the way that I do this at least. I'm like, I can't live like this. So if you've gotten there, like I was, you're probably like, something has to change here. Like there has to be a different way to do this, because this was a big inconvenience, but I have multiple inconveniences. Some of them have names, all of my life, and I can't be thrown off by this all the time. Right? I have to find a way to do this. And I started by doing this, is asking God for wisdom because I was stuck. I was like, God, I don't just want to stay on this path to wisdom. I need it right now. I need wisdom in this situation. So when we reach hard times, the first thing we got to do is look to God to ask for wisdom to help us stay the course. And as I started to make that turn, right, to say, okay, God, I want wisdom on how to do this because there's a lot of problems. And I make this turn. Here's what I started to realize. A couple things that I think are really important as you walk through difficult times. The first one I realized was this, is we cannot deny the humanity or divinity of what we are experiencing. I'll explain this a little bit. There are two sides to all these things. We live in a life that has no separation from God. Every part of our life matters to God and is a part of what God is doing. Right? And so what happens is this, if we ignore one of these pieces, we are no longer living in reality. If I only live in the humanity side and I start asking, why me, God, why? It's not reality. Bad things happen to people all the time. Not saying yours doesn't matter, not minimizing mine, but bad things happen. We live in a sinful world where we make sinful decisions, where other people make sinful decisions, right? Bad things are happening all around us. If I only acknowledge the divinity side and I don't acknowledge the humanity side, I get stuff like, God has a plan, and you're like, not helpful, right? If you've ever been in a time of grief or real struggle and someone's like, the joy of the Lord is your strength, and you're like, I hate you, right? Are they wrong? They're not wrong. They're not wrong, but it's unhelpful. When we deny one side and the other, they have to work together because it's the way God intended it, is that our lives are not separated on these parts. And so here's what this starts to look like when we acknowledge both things. When I acknowledge my humanity, I am allowed to say, this sucks. I hate this. I am not thankful for this at all. I wish this never happened. I wish we could go back in time. Driving a 2009 Toyota Forever was actually a pretty good plan. It was free. I didn't have a car, right? All of those things, right? None of that is bad. Some might say it was smart to drive a Toyota. I don't know. But, right, the person who hit me, were they wrong? Yeah, they got a ticket for it, right? They were wrong. This has created a problem that I have never had to solve before. I've never been in a car accident. I'm like, I don't even know what you do. I'm in an ambulance on the way to the hospital. I'm like, so is like my truck just going to chill there? Like, what is going to happen to that thing? I got to come back tomorrow to get it? And I'm like, I might have taken an ambulance ride even if I wasn't hurt because I didn't have a ride. I don't know how to get off the highway. I'm like, what happens, right? I've never had to solve this. And rewinding seemed like the simplest solution. Those are all true things. But in tandem with this, I also need to acknowledge the divinity of what's happening here, and it's this. All of that is true, but God is in control of it. I believe that. As a follower of Jesus, I'm saying God is in control. God is for me. He's with me. He's not against me. And I know that when I need God, He is with me. He's for me. And so I start to acknowledge that I trust God. I'm not just having a nice mental attitude and over-spiritualizing it, being like, this is fine, right? If you talk to me, I was like, yeah, this is awful. But also, I have confidence that God is in control. And there's a place to be there that is nice, that God is in control there. This is where confidence comes from in these situations. Confidence in difficult situations comes from acknowledging the humanity, the realness, and the reality of where you are, and acknowledging the realness and the reality of who God is. And when we do that together, our difficult times start to change. Here's what I knew in that moment was, yep, I'm kind of laid up. I got an arm thing going on, doing some therapy, MRIs, all this stuff. I'm like, don't know, hit my head a lot, got some scans done, not sure what those are going to show, right? I'm like, but here's what I know. Whatever is happening in the situation, God is not going to waste a painful moment in my life. I just got to figure out what it looks like. And that's the challenge. So for me, I made this shift. I started moving forward, and here's what helped me. As I started to look, okay, now I'm going to acknowledge both things here. Now, how do I actually get a proper view about what's going on? The first thing I think is we have to ask the right questions. I spent a lot of time asking why, like I said, right? I was every day, I'm just like, why? Why now? Why this specific thing? Could I have chose a different hard thing? It could have been multiple choice, right? Why this thing? Here's the single best thing that I did. The single best thing. This has actually changed my life in a variety of ways. This has helped me in every difficult thing since. when something happens, asking a different question. And here's what it is. I think this is actually from a guy, Craig Groeschel, I think is a guy I put out there just to give him credit for it. But I heard this, and this helped me so much. I think it was him. Might have been someone else, but it wasn't me on my own. So that's the main point of that. But here's the question I started asking is, what do you want me to learn instead of why me? When I could look at my situation, and believe me, when I said this, I remember the moment that this happened, I had either read it or it came to my mind from when I read it before. I was talking to my wife about, like, I'm frustrated. I don't want to be this way in this situation. Like, I don't like where I am on this. And I was like, what does God want me to learn? Like, I said it like that. I'm like, what could he possibly want me to learn through this? But it did something for me as I started to say that again. What does God want me to learn? And it started to take me down a different path, because here's what it allowed me to do. I started to look at my difficulty, and when I ask, instead of why me, I did that for a little bit. It's humanity, right? I started to move into the divinity and say, what does God want me to learn here? And it allowed me to take my difficulty and turn it into opportunity. And this is not a like crazy thing where you're like, you'll have tons of opportunity. It's not like a health, wealth, and happiness thing. It was my confidence in knowing that God was doing something. And if I only ask why, I'm going to miss something. And so I had to start to look at it differently. And what this did for me, when I started saying, what do you want me to learn? It was me asking for wisdom in this very situation. God, will you help me? Right? It's like the Philippians verse saying, bring it to God, because all of it matters. Bring it to him with petition. I'm like, God, you got to do something here. I can't find a used car. I can't find anything. It's horrible out there. Bring it all to him. Because what we're doing when we ask this is we are putting ourselves in the position to be changed by God, realizing that he's doing something. So along the way, we're going to ask the right questions. The other thing we're going to start to do is fill our minds with the right things. In that verse at the end, I love it, just listed out like anything that's praiseworthy, that's good, that's noble. Because here's what happens. Mental pathways are a real thing, and when you only ask why me and it's negative and you go down the route that I did, right, you end up in a place where you probably don't want to be. There's lots of noise happening, right? The day the police report went public or whatever, I don't know if you've ever been in a car accident of any kind, I got 60 calls from every lawyer in Ohio, I think, so I know them all now, right? There's this phone call, it's like, hey, we heard you were in an accident. Would you like a large sum of money? And I was like, I don't think, what? Like, I don't know what to do. There were people dropping things off at my house. I'm pretty sure maybe I was gone. They might have flown a helicopter over and like dropped things. They are intense, right? There's all this noise, right? I'm like doing my normal things in life. I'm like shopping and I'm going to get my hair cut and I'm just telling people what's going on because they're asking about my life and they're like, well, you could probably get a big payout from that. I was like, could I? Okay, it's not really my speed totally. And they're like, yeah, you should really get that guy on the billboard, make him pay. I'm like, that's a cool slogan, but I don't think I want to make him pay. I don't know. It's not like, right? All this noise is happening. People are like, you should really go after him. You should get what you deserve out of this. Right? There's all this noise happening around me. And my mind's not strong enough to withstand all that. I'll just be totally honest with you. I'm like, maybe I should. Maybe I should have something nice. Right? I had to start to fill my mind with it. Right? I had to go and say, okay, what does God say about trials? What does he say about tough times? What does God say about when someone wrongs you? Because here's what happened, right, is I started to become prideful. They're like, yes, I do deserve something out of this. Yes, right? I started treating it like I was a person who had never made a mistake and looking at the person who hit me as a person who should be punished for making a mistake, right? That's where I was. And here's what I learned over time is the reason we need to fill our mind with the right things, whether that's reading God's word, being around what we talked about last week with the wisdom team and having the right people say things to me in important moments, is because if pride creeps in, right, pride is the enemy of wisdom. Pride is the enemy of wisdom. It's humility that's its partner. And so I have to look and say, what is God wanting to do here, right? I'm submitting myself to the Lord. And it's through that humility that actually allows me to start to see this as opportunity. I don't want to be hardened towards a person in my pride and miss the wisdom that's at hand here. Right? I have to get to the point where I can set down my pride and my desire and what I want and say, I'm sure God's doing something. I'd really like to know what it is, and I want to be a part of that. I don't want to be bitter towards people and all of those things. And so you have to start to move that way as well. This helped my mind go that way. And the last thing is rely on God to do his part. right? Once I make the shift to say, okay, God's definitely doing something, I would like to learn about that so that I can participate in it, right? Or I would like to know what he wants me to learn. Then we allow God to act in his vineyard, to start to do things in our lives. And I'll share with you how this story ended up for me. I think it could have gone totally differently, by the way, if I wouldn't have been able to kind of make this mental shift and talk to the right people and pursue wisdom on what I was doing. When I made these changes to how I was interacting with difficulty, here's what happened to me. I immediately saw change in what I was looking at in my situation, and God gave me opportunity in his kingdom. I don't know what it's going to look like for you. Here's what it looked like for me. Because I had to do all these things, because I was in the hospital, I have like a captive audience at all the doctor's offices and therapy appointments, right? I'm getting to talk about Jesus in those situations. Right, I actually got to share Christ with 2 people because of this thing that happened. And man, when I look back, I'm like, I'm really glad I made that shift, because actually for me, I'm like, that's fine. If that's what God wants me to do, I'm good with that, because that's actually what I want to do with my life. But when I look back, what started to happen is I had spiritual conversations with many people because my mind was where God wanted it to be, that he would be doing something. Here's what's true is that in your life and in my life, God is doing something, even in the difficult times. And if we can simply, what we're doing is we're not getting, listen, I wasn't rewarded for doing a good job with that, by the way. That's not what that was. I wasn't, God is pleased with his servant. He will now reward him. That is not what was happening. What's happening is my rock solid head got the things through, and I turned my awareness to where God already was. And when I had this awareness of the fact that God is doing something, I was able to see much, much more in my life. I saw places where I needed to change. I saw people who needed the love of Christ. I just saw opportunity everywhere, and it was fun, right? I didn't think that my car accident would be fun. Also, not recommending a car accident, by the way, just to say that out loud, right? But what I realized is God is already working. And here's what I started to ask myself. I wonder how much I've missed in other difficult times in my life. And remember, I said you have to acknowledge the humanity part too. I'm not telling you not to be sad or not to be angry. I'm not telling you any of that. I'm simply saying, could we acknowledge both sides in difficulty? Because this is what keeps us after. It's what gives us the best shot at staying after wisdom. Because the pursuit of wisdom becomes, you're almost like, you're running behind God, and he's like throwing all this stuff out there, and you're like, oh my gosh, there's this thing over here. Like, I'm like enjoying myself. Not all the time, just be honest about that. But this change starts to allow you to see what God is doing around you. And I read this passage a little different now, and I think if we can start to look at our difficulty and look for opportunity, I think we would read it different too, because when I read this passage now, I'm like, I get why Paul is saying rejoice now. Because Paul is acknowledging both things, right? If anybody, Paul, the author, knew about affliction, he knew about bad times. Okay, that was like his middle name was Bad Times. I don't know if that was his middle name, probably wasn't. But anyways, he knew about it, so he knows the humanity side. But what he's saying is, I found the key. I have found the way to live a better life in difficulty. And he's saying what it is it's rejoicing in the Lord. And the reason he said that is not because he wants to be over spiritual. It's because he says God's doing something already. And this is another opportunity for you to engage what he's already doing. Right? I started to look at it. It says, let your gentleness be evident to all. It's like, well, I don't know if you've ever talked to insurance companies on the phone, and they make you a really low offer on your car that just got crashed, and you're like, gentleness? What's that? Right? It's like, I'm like, now I know why he's saying this. He's saying rejoice. I'm like, have you ever had to tell a person that's rejoicing to be gentle? I think he's talking to someone who's going through a hard time. Right? Let our gentleness be evident to all. And what he's saying, he's like, don't be anxious about it. He's like, I've got it under control. Acknowledge the fact that I am who I say that I am. I'm going to do this for you. I'm the author and the perfecter of your faith. I'm at the right hand of God. I'm advocating for you. Right? I'm with you in this. He's saying, present it all to me with thanksgiving, right? And I think one of the most amazing things there is if you ever heard someone in their life when they are in a really bad time, and they start to say things like, I'm just thankful the Lord woke me up today. I always used to think that was so weird. I was like, that's a weird thing to say, man. Quit doing that. It's weird. But here's what I realized, is when everything else is stripped away, when hard times come, you look for thankfulness in places you wouldn't normally think to find it. It gives perspective on things. And so we read this and we see what Paul is trying to say. He's like, when we do this, when we rejoice, when we're thankful, when we present this to God, he's like, when we fill our minds with things that are going to be helpful and we get words from people who are actually helpful, it's going to guard your heart, right? The peace of Christ, which takes you past understanding, will guard your hearts. And this is not just a thing that a godly person can understand and a person who doesn't know Jesus couldn't understand. This is a thing that no one understands, because here's what I would tell you if you ask me, so what about that whole thing? I'm like, I don't know. It's kind of like great. There's like a lot of peace about it now. And I don't know why, because it wasn't awesome, right? Many people who know the Lord, who walk through difficulty, will look back and say, yeah, the Lord was doing something, right? The Lord, like I figured this out. Like they start to say things that don't make sense because the Lord promises to give us peace in that. And listen, I don't know why it had to happen that way. I would have rather it didn't still if I got the choice. But I just know that God did something, and he's giving me peace about it over time. And so when we start to practice this and we put our minds on correct things, it starts to give us all kinds of opportunity. And so here's what I would think I would ask us to do. Right? As followers of Jesus, as we're pursuing wisdom, right? That's part of what God asks us to do, is to grow and pursue wisdom in these things. And he says, if we ask for it, he'll give it to us. Right? We have to go get that wisdom. And as we do this, here's what I think we can do as we try to keep after it. We don't want to get the wind knocked out of us. Is first, we need to build a discipline of asking good questions in hard times. You might find a different one. That one worked really, really well for me. It really changed a lot of things for me. It's a simple one. There might be other ones you need to ask, right? And you kind of have to figure that out. But you have to start to say, God, what do you want me to learn? We have to know that going into this journey of wisdom, if we're over the series, is going to be difficult, right? Set our expectations right. Maybe start to write down, what are my expectations for my life? Like that it would go well, that it goes like minimally well, that I have this, right? Actually start to talk about, what am I actually expecting out of life? And then when hard times come, do I see a correlation there of how that works? So I need to change those. Another thing I would say is, can we get curious about what God is doing in our difficulty? Right? Can you start to think, when people are going through difficult times, of course, in our humanity, we're going to comfort them, right? And our goal is to lead them into the fact of knowing that God is with them and being curious about what he's going to do. And even in our own life, can we be curious about what God might be doing right now in this difficult time that you came in with this morning? Another thing is this, as believers, practicing gratitude in the good times too. I think one of the most valuable things that my wife and I did for a while, and we probably should do it again, but we kind of left off. We had a thankfulness journal, and every night it was actually Bob Combs told us that he and his wife did this, and we tried it for a while, and it was kind of amazing, because at first I was like, 3 thankful things from today. Like, I don't know. Like, I would get some repeats, because here's what it told me, is I wasn't thinking about what I'm thankful for a lot, and it built this muscle of thinking what I'm thankful for. And so when I get into hard times after doing that for a while, and I have this practice of gratitude in my life, I actually start to think of those things first when things go wrong. Man, I'm really thankful. I'll tell you, like, I don't know why the first thing I thought, I'm like really guilty about this sometimes, that my car was crashed and that I didn't look in the back seat and see broken car seats and think, thank God my family wasn't with me first. Because that's something to be thankful for, right? And I'm not beating myself up over that, but like, I think gratitude helps us focus on things that really matter. And this is what even the Bible would say in James 4, that as we seek to be humble, and gratitude, I think, is where we get to humility, when we realize what we have and what we need. In James chapter 4, I think verse 6, it would say that God gives grace to the humble, and he opposes the proud. And what I love about that is that when we can arrive at a place of humility, God's going to give us grace. Because we're going to screw it up sometimes, right? You're not going to do this perfectly. We're going to need help with this. But in the same way that God died for us and saved us by grace, as he continues to walk with us in our life and we try to do our best at it, if we are walking in humility with him, he's willing to give us grace in the everydays too. And I love that about our God. And so we want to get our hearts there. And I would say if you're not a follower of Jesus, if you're considering that or you're not sure where you stand with him, you have to know that God died for you for this reason, right? That our life and the difficulty and the way it is, God died to give us hope in this life, to see opportunity in the difficulties, and because he loves you. Most of difficulty a lot of times is not what God is doing to us, right? God, certainly things happen, but it's sin, and God gives us hope in this. And he shows us that he's with us, that he never leaves us, and that he's willing to walk from the beginning of our life to the end of it with us. And so if you're not a follower of Jesus, I would say, did you know that God died for you for this reason, that you can have hope in this life? If you're going through a really difficult time that you don't see a way out of. And not just hope at the end of this life, but hope in this life, that he could pull you out of a drift, that he could pull you out of a cycle, that he could pull you out of a difficult time and give you a better way to live life. In the same way that a loving father would give his children a better way to do something. That's his heart for you. And so if you don't know Jesus, you can do that. You can ask him, you can ask to have a relationship with him. Ask him to forgive you. Tell him that you need him, that you want him in your life. That is what asking for wisdom is God, I need you in my life. I can't do this alone. If you do that, I'd love for you to write that on one of those cards or even tell us afterwards. But in a moment, I'll pray, and you can ask him for that. You can ask him for a relationship. Tell him that you have sin in your life you're not proud of, things that you've done wrong, and you need his help. And he's faithful to save you in that way. And also realize that he's not going to stop at just forgiving you. God wants you to have a life of joy through this path of gratitude and thankfulness and wisdom. That's a fullness of life, right? The same God that died to save our lives died also to give us fullness of life that I'm convinced comes through wisdom in that way. Let me pray for us, and I'd love for you to ask the Lord maybe what is he wanting you to learn right now. And maybe you need to do some checking on your relationship with him or where you are with that. Let me pray. Lord, thank you so much for loving us. Thank you for dying for us, first of all, Lord, for giving us a chance at relationship with you. And God, thank you that it's not something that you hold over our heads. Lord, you know this life is hard. And Lord, because of that, you give us the tools that we need. Lord, you acknowledge our humanity and that life is hard and that we're sad. We see that happen in the Bible time and time again where you are with people who are hurting. But God, you love us too much to leave us in that spot. So thank you for guiding us. Thank you for giving us something like wisdom that can pull us out of difficult times. Lord, for the people in this room that are followers of you and have been tracking with us in this journey for wisdom, Lord, I imagine if they've been trying to do that, they might have already got the wind knocked out of them. They felt kicked when they're down or just faced difficulty. Lord, give them endurance. Lord, continue to remind them that you are faithful to see them through, that you are faithful to perfect their faith. And Lord, give them life to the fullest through wisdom and humility. Lord, for those that maybe don't know you, that they would realize that you love them, you want relationship with them, and that they can have that just by asking for it. God, thank you for walking with us always in difficulty, never leaving us, never forsaking us, but Lord, being with us until the very end of the age. We love you, Lord. We're thankful for your promises that stand true even in times of great difficulty. We love you, Jesus. Amen.